quorum.
Gary.
You're live. Not in the room.
We're missing Gary.
Okay, we are live. We're going to call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock and ask for a roll call, please.
We have a quorum yet, madam.
We're live, however, so pretend.
Jackie Whitsitt.
Here.
Gary Tenenbaum.
He's here.
Thank you. Bill Infante is here. Katie Schwer
Here.
is here. Auden Schindler is absent.
Is he eating?
Jennifer Riffle
Present.
and Ryan Slack.
Do we know if Ryan is...
I believe Ryan is not coming, if I recall. I think he's not coming tonight. I forgot about that till just this second.
I haven't seen his vehicle move in a really long time.
Yeah, okay.
Send a confirmation.
Okay, we're in session, guys.
We are live.
Yeah, it's
We're
happening.
live.
We already did roll call.
From Basalt.
We already did roll call from the other room.
Okay.
As always, we want to thank Grassroots for being here every time we have a meeting and doing a wonderful job. If you missed tonight's meeting, which is broadcasting live, you can go to grassrootstv.org and catch us. Our videographer is Amy. And tomorrow we have a mayor's coffee scheduled at CC's at 8 o'clock in the morning. Ryan will be there. Maybe something fun we could talk about, if anybody wants to come, is the fire mitigation that's going on the hillside, because it's pretty exciting, and we're very happy about it. I guess I'm not supposed to read that. Okay. So our next item is the consent agenda. Are there questions, motions on the consent agenda? Questions or motions?
Can I make a comment?
Or comments? Did I leave that out?
I'm very excited about the electric vehicle charger location, and that thank you so much, Sarah, for working diligently on that. And it's equitable for the town, and I thank Holy Cross. So, on that note, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Did you have a finger up?
Well, just that I will vote yes, but I wasn't here for that one meeting, March 12th, minutes.
Okey doke. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. Jennifer, you are far and away the best reader of the Basalt is Wonderful, and I thought since your mouth was full of rice and stuff, you could,
Let's do it.
let's do it.
You know, professionally, I talk and eat, so it works great.
Somebody pays you to do that.
Sounds great.
Let's
just
see how
carry it
she
on
does. Leave your mouth full and do it.
Basalt is an inclusive, sustainable mountain community that boasts both historic charm and progressive vision. It is an engaging place to live, work, and play while offering an abundance of creative, professional, educational, and recreational outlets.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, we would like to hear from anybody in the public who has something to say. If you want to come up, that's not on the agenda, if you want to come up and deliver your comments, you're welcome to do that now. And invited, actually. Okay, so I guess not. Also, who shall I give this to? We would like to ask for any positive comments and gratitudes about Basalt from anyone in the audience, on staff, on council. Anybody have some? Pam!
I'm really grateful the guys are here clearing the hillsides.
I was just thinking that same thing. They're working really hard.
Amazing.
Yeah, and they're happy. Like when they're not cutting trees, they were doing push-ups. Did you see that?
No?
Yikes. Yikes, scary people. Okay,
That's what I do when I'm not at a council meeting.
sure. Cut brush and then do push-ups. Let's see. Okay, mayor and council reports and comments. You can't use the brush thing again, the fire mitigation. That's gone down twice.
I have a question. Is there any update on the gun range committee?
Funny you should ask.
Yes, so there's a meeting on the 26th of this month And of course, that's a council meeting day.
Is it the 23rd or the 26th?
I think it's the is it 26th, the next council meeting day? It's the 23rd, sorry. And they've invited, the Board of County Commissioners from both Eagle Pick and our town council, and the staff to basically go over the findings from the group. Of course, that meeting is at 6 o'clock, and they weren't able to find a place here, so it's at the 3rd Street Center in Carbondale. I've encouraged them, I wrote an email this afternoon to see if they could reschedule that possibly. But they were also gonna then follow up a few weeks later with the full kind of public reveal of what those were. So this was, I mean, of course, it would be a public meeting, so the public could show up, given that there would be elected officials there. But it was intended to just kind of brief the electeds.
Yeah,
on
it would
that.
also be nice to have the meeting in Basalt, since all of us have been massively impacted and would love to conveniently hear the findings.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
maybe
I'm
a little
working on
bit
that.
more
Thank
on
you.
that later, if you
Sure.
think you can make them budge. Bill, did you have a hand up for a comment?
Not really, but I did have a question or a request. And the request, I met with a fellow, I was just chatting with Gary about it, a fellow named Eden Vardy who runs the Farm Collective up in basically Snowmass in that area. What's that?
It's Cozy Point.
Yeah.
Cozy
Yes.
Point
Cozy
is
Point
one of the
Ranch.
lessors, and I guess,
It's known as
He
Cozy
runs it
Point.
at Cozy Point Ranch.
right. Okay, suffice it to say, he has a wonderful institution called the Farm Collective, used to be called Aspen Tree, and he has been nominated to serve on the CPW Council. And he is soon to be a Basalt resident. He's building up here on Homestead, so it's wonderful that we have a young person so committed to environmental education and to growing food for our valley. And cutting to the chase, he was interested to recruit support for his candidacy. Although Jared Polis has nominated him, he has not yet been Senate confirmed, which is a step that is forthcoming. He's not sure when. And so I would like to ask that the council consider writing a letter of support for his candidacy.
For,
Eden Vardy for appointment to the CPW
State Board.
Citizens Commission, and he is the candidate for the production agriculture seat. And he needs support with our Senator, Kerry Donovan.
thank you.
I'd support that.
What's his name? I'm
I don't
sorry.
even know the
Eden
guy.
Eden Vardy. It looks like Eden.
Yeah.
VARDY.
If we get direction, we can follow up on that. I can
Yeah.
figure out how to
Let's
get
do
in touch
that.
with him.
Since most of us don't know who this person is.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I can send you some information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
okay.
guess the Pitkin County Commissioners are going to weigh in on his behalf. And
Great.
it would be great to have somebody representing us on CPW, frankly.
Due date on that? I mean, do we know how imminent or?
He doesn't think Senate is necessarily going to entertain this before they convene for this session,
Okay.
which means he may serve in an acting capacity for an indefinite period of time.
Okay.
So this session's almost over, so you mean the
Exactly.
January, okay. We have all day and all night.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get working.
It would be good if we
Yeah.
could.
And we can bring it back to the council so you guys can
Right.
see it.
I can hit on all of those. So growing food, the Basalt Regional Library has a seed starting and garden prep workshop on Monday, April 2nd, or excuse me, Monday, April 22nd. And that is before our next council meeting. And then as well, a club that I am another proud member to be of is the Basalt Library Seed Savers Club. And they meet on our other Tuesday nights. I believe it is the first Tuesday of each month. And Signa Strom is heading this up. And if you are interested in joining, you can contact her. And the library has free heirloom organic seeds that anyone can check out. And they are aiming this year for people to check seeds back in. And they rate the difficulty scale of how to harness the seeds by ski run, blue circle, green square, and black diamond. So carrots are like a black diamond because it takes at least 2 years for a carrot to go to seed. But really cool, and that's a way for all of us to grow food in our town. And then with the shooting range, I had an interaction with CPW this past week it was last week on Thursday, I believe it was. I was hiking and I heard shooting at the shooting range. And I was very surprised because the way that I understood it was that the shooting range is closed on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And following up with CPW, they have not gotten back to me to clarify if the Roaring Fork Sports Persons Club has the availability or has in their contractual agreement to be able to go up there, because it was the Sportsman's Club that was shooting on a Thursday when the range is closed. So if anyone has further questions or they do have a complaint, the way to go is to call, to Google Vale Dispatch, and that will get you to the Eagle Sheriff, who will then go to the shooting range and make contact. And then they will contact CPW. Yeah.
Gary, do you have anything?
Nope.
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions for Pam, or you may have it on your list. The river cleanup is soon. Do you know when that is? I think it's the 27th.
I have it.
The 27th? Okay, so we should say this again. So the river cleanup is April 27th. It's a super, pardon me?
Saturday.
Okay, it's a Saturday,
27th,
right? It's a super fun day, fun for kids, I think, unless it's 20 degrees, which it has been sometimes. So we'll say that again at the next meeting if we remember. And there was something else coming up. Oh, the Earth Day Parade. When is that?
That's Monday, the 22nd,
Okay,
I believe.
Monday.
At 10, it's in the proclamation.
Okay. So Monday, the 22nd, is the favorite day of my life because there's like 700 kids that march through town and they stop and sing a song. How they get through it, I don't know, but they're really good at it. So, and that one we won't be able to say again because we have a meeting the day after that. So, okay. Anybody else? Going? Manager's report.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Can I, sorry. I also want to report, I forgot, I didn't write this down, that Crown Mountain Recreation District is moving forward and has approved a needs assessment for a field house, which is to be 55,000 square feet, and looking at if it is a financially feasible project, and I will report back on how that goes.
Great. Thank you. Big field house. Okay. Now manager's report.
No, thank you.
well, the one thing I was going to talk about, my thunder was stolen already, but I do want to expand on it a little bit, is the hillside fire mitigation that we have going on up there. We did do a press release just to let folks know if they see lots of cutting and lots of bodies up on the hillside what was going on. But the intent with that is really for it to be sort of a showcase of what fuel reductions and mitigation can look like when done well and done, with a trained staff. And so right now with the leaves off, they were able to get up there and really do a cleanup. They pulled out a lot of trash as well that had been accumulated over the years. But they assure me that once the leaves sprout, it's going to fill in very nicely, and we'll start to get, daylight in the spots where it hasn't been, and some of the natural grasses and whatnot will come back. But not grasses that are going to grow so high and create yet another fire danger. So anyway, that's great. So we did get some assistance, a lot of assistance from the Roaring Fork Fire and Rescue. So they were out there all day. They went and helped knock doors because some of that was on private property. So they did a lot of heavy lifting for that. And it was the SWIFT crew out of the Rifle Correctional Facility. Those were the guys out there today. And then First Bank was one of the sponsors. If you all recall, they came and presented a $50,000 grant earlier this year, and we were able to tap into some of that for for pulling this off. So at the moment, the town hasn't spent any money on that, but it's had a lot of great support, which is awesome. So more to come on that. And then along that same thread, just a quick update on the NRCS flood mitigation. So we have something on the agenda tonight, which is a contract with SGM. That was sort of just a requirement within our contract for the feds. So we can talk about that in a bit. But we do have our, I think we have our IGA on there as well with CPW, and we've completed our IGA with Eagle County. We met with SGM and the rest of the group last week to start strategizing. So the wheels are turning as far as the design and deployment of that project goes. So nothing will be in place prior to the runoff happening. The goal is really to kind of try to get some of these things in place before the monsoons. It'll probably be during monsoons, practically speaking, when construction is still going on and trying to get some of these improvements in. But we are prioritizing the highest risk areas. So anyways, that's moving along, and thought I'd share that. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Is there something else?
Oh, yes, there is. Hot off the press.
Just in.
So the first master plan kickoff meeting is at the Temporary on Thursday, April 25th. And that's going to start at 5:30. I think it's about an hour and a half. Is that right? Yep. Okay.
Cool.
That's it.
Margaritas, I assume, at the Temporary?
There'll be food, but no margaritas.
Gotcha. Okie dokie.
Hey, Jackie, quick question.
Yes, sure.
With regard to the April 23rd agenda, I see that there will be a presentation of the Tabor survey. Is there a chance that council could get a look at that beforehand? Because otherwise, frankly, there are often questions that come up when articles get written and we haven't seen these things. So it would be just wonderful if we could share a copy a day before it goes into the agenda or something like that, just so we can kind of prepare.
We can work on that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okie dokie. Okay, so our first public hearing is on Basalt River Park LLC on behalf of the Roaring Fork Community Development Corporation, a Colorado nonprofit, has made an application to develop 28 residential units, 3 commercial buildings, which are proposed to include 2 nonprofit facilities and a food and beverage operation and associated improvements on the property and on town-owned property adjacent to or near, commonly known as the Roaring Fork CDC property. Development actions include rezoning to the CSC Community Serving Commercial Zone District, CSC Sketch Plan Review, amendments to the CSC Zone District, Sketch Plan Subdivision, ESA, and ESA Reach to Floodplain Review. Ryan or James? A
James
tie
is gonna
goes
kick
to the
this
rudder,
off.
by the way.
Okay. This is a continued public hearing on the River Park development application that was submitted by River Park LLC and the Roaring Fork Community Development Corporation to construct a mixed-use project on the CDC property. It used to be part of the Pan and Fork Mobile Home Park closest to Two Rivers Road. The original application that was submitted included 28 residential units, as well as had commercial areas offered for the art base, the Basalt Chamber, and a small food and beverage facility as part of that original application. The council was not accepting of the original application, and the applicant worked with the council over a series of working sessions to come up with and adjust the development program to a program that was identified as being workable to the majority of the council. It includes 23 residential dwelling units, 11 which are the River Cabin townhomes, as well as a remainder of various sizes of affordable housing units, multifamily units, as well as makerspace office building and land for the art base and a community building. The council directed staff to have a financial analysis conducted on the program. So town's financial consultant, Bruce Kimmel, has conducted that financial analysis. You have a memo in your packet from Bruce, and we actually have Bruce here this evening to present his conclusions. Also, after Bruce presents his findings, Christy, the finance director, is going to briefly go over work that she has done on past town expenditures, and you have a memo from Christy in your packet as well. So staff this evening would recommend hearing from Bruce and Christy, and then taking public comments, and then providing council discussion after that. So we'll go ahead and move into Bruce's comments.
Thanks, James.
Welcome, Mr. Kimmel.
And we do have the applicant group here as well. We've got Tim Belinsky.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Tim. Hi, Michael.
Well, thanks, Mayor and Council. It's great to be back with you in person. It's been a little while, and I'm cautiously optimistic that this is the start of getting to a solution that will lead to an outcome that everyone will be happy with on this very important parcel. I am going to start with just a brief overview of my analysis, just hitting some of the key points. Please stop me along the way if you have any questions.
Bruce, just a quickie.
Yes.
Just since the team is up here, maybe we could just get introductions really quickly for anybody who possibly in TV land don't know.
Sure. Well, for continuity's sake, I wanted to make sure we had Rich Carr here from Cottle Carr Yaw, partner with the architecture firm right up the street, and Michael McVoy, who is the spokesperson for the Roaring Fork CDC, a Community Development Corp, that is the owner of the parcel that we're talking about.
And who are you?
And my name's Tim Belinsky, and I've been around the block. I feel like I'm going around the block more and more with this.
And I'm Bruce Kimmel with Ellers, the town's financial advisor. So. Great. Well, so let me just give a brief overview again of what we were asked to do. We were asked to dig into what the development group is asking for in terms of town participation, both direct participation and indirect. We looked to see if there were any red flags, as we call them, in the financial plan in terms of, James, can we go to the next slide? In terms of anything missing from the developer's pro forma or anything else that would cause us grave concern about the overall feasibility and accuracy of the financial plan. We looked at the specific components of the development budget, the operating pro forma, sales assumptions, and other components to see if they were generally reasonable, and to then really test the availability of capacity within that budget to fund some additional costs. You can call them shifting from what is assumed for the town, or rebalancing, as I call it in the memo. But the idea is that, first, is there a gap? Is there some need for town participations in this larger area? And then also, can the project support any additional investment? So let me go on to the proposed participations then. Just to define my terms, by direct participations, I mean costs that the Basalt River Park Group explicitly assumes in their pro forma that the town would pay. And indirect are costs that either are not fully defined or excluded from the pro forma that the developer has, but that we think are likely to be relevant and likely town responsibilities. So a direct participation that is proposed by BRP, and again, these are all proposals of the developer. Nothing has been agreed to by the town, by town staff, or by town council. We're really just getting all of the salient issues on the table so that we can then see a path, if possible, towards a mutually agreeable solution. One of the direct participations that's proposed is that the town purchase approximately 54% of the CDC parcel. That would be the main public portion on the eastern part of the site, as well as the so-called polygon. And the purchase price that's proposed there is $2 million and a little bit more. You'll recall that from the memo that the strict pro rata cost would be about $1.7 million, and there's a proposed $300,000 premium, bringing the total town share to $2 million. The developer has also proposed that the town purchase the 5,000 footprint for the art base project, which would be between the town's portion of the parcel and the developer's portion. The allocated cost for that is $160,000, and then the idea is that the town would resell it to the art base when that organization is ready to proceed. Another form of direct participation would be a waiver of the parkland dedication fee that would normally apply to a development of this type. As I noted in my memo, the developer and the CDC have an understanding that the town agreed to waive future parkland dedication fees or land dedications as part of the deal in 2011 by which the town and the CDC purchased the Pan and Fork Mobile Homes Park. An indirect fund or type of participation.
Long day, huh?
Yeah, long day, a lot of talking. Thank you, Mayor. An indirect form of participation would be that the town fund all costs for a community building on the so-called polygon. So in terms of designing, constructing, figuring out how to operate it, that is not something that's included in the developer's pro forma. In addition, the town would identify funding for roughly $900,000 of an estimated $1.1 million to rebuild and improve the stretch of Two Rivers Road along the development parcel. That would include the road itself as well as sidewalks, a bus area, and some parking improvements as well. Again, these are the developer's proposals as to the town's financial participation. The next one is a little bit uncertain. The developer has allocated $1.2 million in their budget for on-site improvements to cover both improvements necessary for their core development site as well as to public access and perimeter areas. As you know, there's going to be a border that we all want to look nice and to be functional between the public and the private spaces, and we just don't have enough information to really know if that implies a town cost or not. And then finally, and probably most significantly, is that the town would not be receiving direct reimbursement from the development pro forma or the budget for past town expenditures that have benefited the CDC parcel. And we'll come back to that in a little bit more later on. So jumping ahead a little bit, I just want to put our conclusion here. In doing the pro forma analysis, we've determined that the developer would have capacity to fund approximately another $750,000 of costs from the above town participations, with exactly how that were to happen, that cost rebalancing to be determined. And then our recommendation, leaping ahead again, looking ahead to phase 2, would be for the town really to decide what costs, what forward-looking costs primarily you're really looking to rebalance with the developer in negotiating a development agreement. Really quick on the development analysis, James gave a great overview of the primary elements to the current proposal. But just to recap, there are 13 apartment units, as you can see, and 11 for-sale river cabins, as well as approximately 11,500 square feet of office and maker space. The developer gave us very detailed development budgets, construction funding plans detailing debt and equity financing assumptions, as well as future sales of the project components that I just described, and again, the direct town participations. I also talked quite a few times with town staff about other participations, such as the cost of rebuilding Two Rivers Road in total, as the town expects it. And in conclusion, our finding was that everything hung together in terms of the pro forma, especially at this stage of analysis. We think they've done a pretty detailed and comprehensive job of outlining the development costs and then what they would likely sell the property for, and for the most part, we thought those assumptions were very reasonable. We did find that in terms of room for adjustment, this is a lower density, lower complexity development. The site is pretty well known since the town rebuilt the site a few years ago. And so we think that comparatively speaking, if you compare this project to maybe a larger or a more complicated or a less certain type of development plan, we think there's proportionally a little bit less risk here for the developer. In addition, we think that there is, while it's very typical for developers to have some cushion in some of their soft costs and financing and contingency allowances, we think that on a cumulative basis, when you put them all together for the whole project, there's probably a little bit of trimming that could be done. So that's really how we came to our conclusion that, you know, this isn't a precise science, but more or less, we think that there's about $750,000 of capacity in the development plan for some rebalancing with the town. So then, finally, moving on to phase 2, or looking ahead to phase 2, you know, the town has a lot of moving pieces here in terms of proposed participations from the developer to the town, other town priorities. You've got this pending Tabor situation. You've got a CIP that you're looking to fund, other priorities. And in talking with Ryan and Christy, as well as Susan and James, we determined that it would really be helpful for the town to be able to evaluate the fiscal effects of these potential deal points in a broader context that really tries to look more deeply at the general fund and the post fund in particular, and see how this would affect the town's overall financial feasibility or capacity to achieve all of its objectives, not just this development at River Park. So that's really what we're working on next, assuming that you want to move forward with that analysis. And we're also adding estimates of what new taxes and REITAs and homeowner association contributions this development would generate. And as appropriate, we could look at some other town mechanisms as well to just see what the possible revenue streams would be that you could take into consideration along with the proposed investments that the town would be making. Also, as you know from my memo, we did take a look at the town's capacity to fund CIP projects in general. Your bond levy supported debt is retiring very rapidly over the next 3 to 4 years. And we think, while it's not necessarily an issue for this project, it's part of the bigger picture as you think about all of the things you're trying to juggle from a financial and a capital funding perspective. So really then, Mayor and Council, our goal is to work with you, work with the town staff, in using this pro forma to really guide the town's approach to negotiating a development agreement, and really get guidance from you on some of these big picture policy questions as well. And then hopefully get to agreement on significant deal points so that we can present to you on March 14th. May. That would be hard doing it on March 14th.
Unless you mean like another year.
Yeah, no, this has been a long time. I think we can, I'm cautiously optimistic that we can get there in a month's time. So I think we've made a lot of good progress.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Brian, did you have any things?
Nothing to add right now. I may as we get into the discussion.
Okay. Well, I guess what you're asking from council is just our input on what we're hearing so far. And I have to say that I've had a long lifetime here on the CDC parcel, as have some other people in the room. And the reality is we are much closer now than we have ever been to some kind of agreement. I think we have quite a bit of work to do. I think that I haven't talked to every council person here about it, but I think that different council people have different thoughts about it. But I think that we need to just weigh in on the big chunks here of how we're feeling or what we would like to see worked on further. So unless you have a different approach, that's... You're not allowed to speak?
Oh, yeah, no, we can, she was wondering about allowing Tim to chime in. But to your,
right.
To your question, I think staff is really going to be looking for direction this evening from council, to know, do we want to take it to that next step and start working on the town pro forma and start working on deal points that we would be able to bring you all back something in a month's time that is a rough draft, if you will, of a deal to take, this to, ultimately the next step, get it past, the sketch plan. Some of the initial reactions to, some of these bigger ticket items, like road, like land purchase, the community building, what are your initial reactions to those? And that kind of helps to inform us as we go back and start to talk to Tim about these things.
Okay.
So.
Okay, well, this is a public hearing, so let's open the public hearing right now at 6:35. Yes, sir.
I think Tim did want to say something.
Oh, did you?
I think that'd be appropriate to turn it over to public.
Okay, because this is your turn right now.
One and only.
Well, pretty much, if you have anything that you want to say that the public needs to hear prior to the public making comment, you should probably say it now.
Well, I think just to comment on Bruce's work and the analysis that he's been going through. The outcome that there may be some additional margin in there is actually a relief, you know, on the development side, that there's not gaping holes, there's not some lurking problem, there's not an outcome of this just won't work, because what we've been working in parallel with you on is the size of the project, the density, the height, the types of uses, and as those things work around, you've just got to keep up behind the scenes with the financial tracking of that. And there can be a point where you feel, and we've had that feeling a couple times during this project, the process, that it just wouldn't work financially. So I think it was actually a nice affirmation that Bruce's analysis, as his team in Minneapolis had come out with, it's going to work as a low-density project that we were tasked with coming up with. As it relates to this process, I do think that that the return that is necessary for this kind of a project, although small, as far as the scale of a project, this is about the size and scale of one block at Willits, to give everybody kind of a sense of what's happening and how maybe a banker would look at it. But it's pretty intense from a complexity standpoint. I would differ with Bruce that it's kind of soft on complexity. I think that's your big city perspective coming through here, but I may be confident that we can figure it out. But I do see it as complex. You got multiple layers of uses, offices, a nonprofit sector. You've got these river cabins. You've got a lot of site work still left to do, and an interface with public property that always raises the attention of a bank that it's going to be a lot of decisions that may be out of your control. So I do want to make sure people understand. I don't see it as at all a straightforward project. This is more complex than a block at Willits, no doubt about it. The risks also come in the way of, we are a resort-based economy effectively. The buying pool is thin for the economic driver of the residential and the office uses over there. Those can come and go in no time. And so that's another layer of risk. And also the construction costs are, as you guys might hear, anecdotally at least, that the construction costs are just getting out of control again in this market. So those are things that we're dealing with. We do have the insight of local banks to look at this project as well. We've already done that review. Bruce is aware of that before he even got involved, and we'll be ensuring the bankability of this project as well. That's probably it for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Before public comment, did you want to talk about the expenditures as well, or was that for later?
Sure.
Okay, I thought that people in
No,
the
you should.
public
No, you
might
should.
want to hear that before
They do
their
want to hear
comment.
that. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Christy.
No, you're fine. I just want to make sure. So over the past month or so, especially, my team has worked diligently to look through all of the costs, pretty much by invoice, since 2011 to determine in a pretty good estimate of what this project costs the town, with some assumption points. That's why we call it an estimate, because it's hard to sometimes look backwards 5-10 years in these costs and try to develop an exact accuracy, especially because of some of the complexities of this project in relation to different parcels. You've got the current RMI parcel, the RFC parcel, and then where the CDC's parcel is, and also the town's. It's not sometimes clearly delineated because we have one contractor that had performed many of these costs. So those were some of the challenges in going back. But some of the positives in going back is that I'm really hopeful that this will give people some answers on what our project cost was in total, is the best we could do in looking back, first of all, and create that clarity around what funding sources were utilized for the project, which I believe that this analysis does do, and then also looks at our bonds and how much we repay, what our bond repayment costs are from a principal and an interest perspective, so that people have that understanding of that too. So that's the reason behind this analysis. So if you look on the first page of the analysis, there's pages 1 and 2 really refer to the project costs. And what I mean by project costs is the direct cost related to getting the land from what it was with the trailer park and getting the trailers out of it, and the relocation costs and the river mitigation costs, which were a huge part of that whole process, and also floodplain mitigation.
Excuse me, Christy, can I ask, do we have your information, or is that what this is?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not put that, no.
Okay,
I
okay.
apologize, yeah. I should have, I thought, but I didn't.
Next time.
Okay, thank you. But it's available. So it is in the pack.
Well,
But just
the
for the
public,
television.
for the
For the
public and
public,
for
yeah.
TV, there's a reason why we do that.
Yes.
There are copies in the back for the public to.
But not for the TV.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, okay, so anyway, so when you look at your project by year, so we looked at exactly when we were utilizing the costs under the project as the first vision or look of what we did from 2011 forward to 2018, okay? And in looking backwards, the total revenue sources of the project included here are 7.9 million, but that includes some bond repayment costs that were paid out of post. We wanted to make sure that that was noted in here because we had an initial cost estimate from post of about $2 million and where those costs came from and how we got to the $2 million. And so that's why when we were looking at actual project sources and uses, we took that $992,966 from post. That was not a project cost, it was a repayment cost out to get to our true project costs for this thing of 6.9 million, okay? So that just kind of summarizes our major sources of this project is obviously our 3 million in tax exempt bonds and our 1.9 million approximately in taxable bonds, as well as about 2 million from post. So that's our main sources. We also had some funding from our general fund as well for the project. Okay. So if you look at the next page, page 2, project by category, that really tries the best we could to delineate what the various reasons for the expenditure were based upon the invoices, okay? So you can look at the vast majority being wetlands, river restoration, and Midland and Old Pond Park expenditures. And there were some bond payments, as I stated in there, as well as for a total, including some of our bond costs of $1,098,000. So once again, we get to our $7.9 million look, and $6.9 million after we take some of the bond repayment costs out. So then we go to pages 3 and 4, which really discusses what our bond payments were for this project, separated out by expenditures, principal, and expenditures for interest, okay? The significance of looking at principal versus interest is that our interest costs could sometimes be seen as a project cost. For, you know, if it was a for-profit venture, it would be looked at like that. However, the vast majority of our interest was repaid using property tax revenue sources. So it wasn't impactful on the town's general fund, if you will. So that's another little complexity or nuance of this particular project, but I think it's really important to pull that out. So then if you look at page 4, this just finishes out the project because we're forward-looking on Bruce's analysis of what we're doing in the future. We want to be also forward-looking on what our future bond payment costs will be to finish out this project from a bond repayment cost perspective. And so that's what page 4 does for us, is looks at it from that standpoint.
Questions?
Yes. Christy, on page 4, on total future payments,
Yes.
that's from the year, just to clarify, 2019 to 2023?
Correct.
Okay. Great, and then the next column over is the total.
Right, that's
Okay.
why I tried to separate that out.
Yeah,
So,
that's very useful, thank you.
You bet.
And if I could just point out in that last column, if you look at total bond interest, it's about $600,000, 630. So back to Christie's point, if you look at the project cost of 6.9, plus if you just let the bonds run their course all the way, you really will have a total of the 6.9 plus 600,000 or 7.5 of total financing costs in entirety for the entire River Park area.
Okay.
So,
And that's a community-wide perspective, because costs are costs when you look at, from the perspective or vantage point of a citizen that's paying the property taxes and the town. So it doesn't matter the source, I guess, in some ways, because it's still a cost of the project, is Bruce's point.
And as well, it is important to clarify for the public that the Tabor issue is very different from this bond. That they are not linked together, they are separate, there's no connection together whatsoever.
Well, and actually Tabor makes sure that when there's a question that's asked for a particular bond approval, that it is for those resources are to be able to utilize for that particular purpose only, and it really restricts the use of those funds.
right. And just to reiterate your point, it's a separate mill levy, its own completely separate bucket from all other town revenues and expenditures. Yeah.
Anybody else on council have questions about Christie's? Okay, so I did open the public hearing prematurely. So are there members of the public that would like to come up and comment regarding this application? And in particular, we would like to hear feedback regarding these two presentations. Anybody? Bernie?
Good evening, I'm Bernie Grauer.
Hello, Mr. Grauer.
Hello, good evening. I'm just very pleased to be here and have witnessed all the hard work that this council and this applicant have done to get us to a proposal that appears right-sized in the size, scale, and mass and fits well with the river environment. And I encourage both sides to continue their efforts to negotiate a successful financial plan to realize what you have achieved in the size and scale. You could go with a much more ambitious plan. I think we've seen the community does not accept that level of development on this River Park entrance to town. As far as the financing of it, I think there's plenty of room for negotiation. For me, what had always been a sticking point was the money the town put in to develop the land with the idea we would get fully reimbursed. Looking at everything over the long run, I think probably that's not realistic now, given that we had a development 3 or 4 times in size that we were originally looking at. And looking at the categories, I come up myself with about $1 million, $1.5 million in things like trailer removal, relocation of the people, and other direct costs. And I think a lot of towns would look at those as a reasonable investment for preparation for development of what was a site that was dangerous and could not really be developed. So I would encourage you to work diligently on the deal points, and I think it is quite reasonable for some level of public investment, so this project may, after 7 years, go forward and be completed with what looks like a realistic and appropriate plan.
Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Bernie.
Welcome.
Royal Laybourne, business owner here in Basalt.
How you doing, Royal?
Good.
Good.
Thanks, Council. I have not had a chance to review any of these documents prior to this evening's meeting, and so I'm not familiar with them. The question that pops in my mind is when you were talking about your investments that are proposed in the pro forma by the future investments by the town. that's not included in this report here. This is a cumulative to date.
Correct.
And then moving forward, we're talking about another $2.5 million projected, something like that. Well, and it depends on the road contribution. So it could be another $3.5 million. And so now we're talking about that the town and us taxpayers, I'm a commercial property owner, I have a higher tax burden than many residential properties. And the thing is that if you're responsible for the allocation of these kind of funds, then I don't think it's appropriate at this time to have that kind of an investment in a property that becomes a cash cow for a developer. And I don't think, if you stand back and look at it from any other perspective, if a community puts $10 million into that property, and what they get out of it is a development that, for the first part, there are part components that are okay, but the 11 river cabins are completely out of character for what the community expressed over and over and over and over again. We've been here for years talking about that second homeowners being down there in that spot is going to cause a long-term problem for our community. It's a bad mix for the public park, and it's a bad mix for the community campus, and it's a bad mix for the potential for an incubation spot for small businesses. There's a conflict there. The developer keeps telling you over and over again that it won't work without it. I'm telling you, for $10 million as a taxpayer, this is not what we want. We don't, the rest of it works, but not 11 cabins. Let's talk about what they are. They're exclusive residences for second homeowners. And they're going to cause conflict with every other component of this parcel. And I urge you to think about the massive financial investment that I'm making as a taxpayer in that property right there. And it doesn't mean I need to subsidize a millionaire or a billionaire from Aspen or from Texas or wherever so they can live down there and complain about people having fun in a park. And that's what's going to happen. And we know it's going to happen, and it's real.
Thanks,
very
Royal.
much.
Next?
Sorry, are you doing the 3 minute?
I said 3, yeah. Thank you, Pam. Yes, Jerry.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. I agree with a lot of what Royals just said, and thank you very much for taking my comments. I looked over the economics, and mine was a real simple examination because to me, is first the town is asking to purchase an acre of the property for $2 million. And originally the town had an opportunity to purchase the complete parcel for $3 million. And with the possibility of Pitkin County and Eagle County contributing back $400,000 between them if we would maintain the park aspect of it. Then the town is asked to purchase a parcel for the art base for $160,000. And then we're asked to develop parking and sidewalks for $800,000. Fourth, the town has invested over $250,000. Actually, I hear we've invested a lot more money, $250,000 just to grade this parcel. I'll add just these little simple numbers I have together, and that's $3.2 million. And then of course it is much more, as Royal just pointed out, and as we just learned tonight. The bottom line is that if you buy the park, it would cost the town a whole lot less. And the citizens who rejected a bond for $3 million to buy the park should stand up and also reject this development proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Anyone else? Mark? Hi, Mark.
Hello, Mark Kwasinski. It's like Groundhog Day. I don't know how many times. It's like the 4th Groundhog Day. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? I mean, you take about $8 million of taxpayer money. I mean, okay, first of all, I am pretty angry about this because it's been closed. There hasn't been open to other developers. Sure, we say it is. That's bull. This is like it's been ramrodded through. Why didn't you start from the beginning saying, hey, we are going to subsidize RMI and we're going to subsidize a bunch of big fat cats to get places on, and the people that are involved with this. This is just embarrassing to have this going on and on and on. And you know, I've been in this valley for 35 years and I'm about ready to move because this just disgusts me, what's been going on. What you're looking at is, you're calling them river cabins. Well, why don't we just send some checks up to the Roaring Fork Club? Wouldn't that be a little bit more expeditious to get this done so that we can just make this into this elite exclusive town that some people have this vision? I mean, we've got the entrance over here that somebody decided to do. It's like an entrance coming into a parking garage already. There's 2 little pinch points over here, and that was built about 4 years ago. Somebody decided they were going to make a decision for all of us and ram it down everybody's throat and just do whatever charade is necessary to do this. And this is just insanity, because we could get exactly what we want and it wouldn't cost the taxpayers anything. But instead, we're talking about subsidizing, you know, putting what I equate to mini Roaring Fork Club cabins that will cater to the same group. How long are you going to do this? I mean, I'm getting ready to sell my house because I've just been disgusted over this. And I wasn't going to come down anymore, but we went, the champions of the public access for the river park came up with a great plan, and it's just like, you know, you say it's open, it's not open. This is not an open process. We've selected, why don't we just decide that this one architectural group is going to be the only architect that's going to develop in Basalt. This is going to be the group that's going to develop all of Basalt. And we're just going to become an exclusive community.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else? Okie dokie. Let's close public hearing and go to council for comments. And I will kick it off if you don't mind. There are some big issues that we do need to work through for sure on this parcel. And I think that Bruce made it pretty clear that, and I've heard it out there as well, but the cost of the parcel, the developer asking that we pay $2 million for half of the parcel, I think we've always kind of assumed that it was going to be closer to half the cost for half the parcel. I would have no problem paying $2 million for 2/3 of the parcel, because I think that the community would be very happy with that. The art base, I think it would be fine if the applicant would like to carry that land purchase until the art base is ready to build, but I'm not sure it's appropriate that the town should do that. The street improvements, maybe there's some trading that can go on with street improvements because they do have to get done. I don't know how we approach that, and I don't know if the numbers that are in this report are accurate or not. Because as someone mentioned, the cost of construction is only getting bigger, not smaller, so I don't know. I think there might be a place for some deal making there. The money that has been plowed into that property to date in the past, I have always considered sunk costs. The truth is that had we not done it, a developer would have to do it. So even though I have no intention of trying to push that onto the current applicant, I do believe there is something to be said for $7 million that at least part of that would have had to been carried on the back of whatever applicant came forward. And I guess I have to admit that I do have some issue with the cabins, as Royal pointed out. I feel like they could be piled up on top of housing like everybody else's housing is done. But I'm open to hearing about that if that is the deal breaker. And lastly, and I think that the Aspen Daily News nailed this pretty well for me in the April Fool's paper, saying that the mayor wants a beer garden that's open 24/7, and the mayor still wants that. So I do want a real restaurant there. I'm not sure, given the situation with the town, if we're going to be able to pull the trigger on the idea that we had about doing a publicly owned restaurant or facility. I'm not sure that is necessarily feasible. I still would like to see the applicant go back and look again at a possible real restaurant. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be little ones, kind of like Harry proposed a long time ago. But I think that my number one deal is, truthfully, for $3 million, we could have the whole parcel. Everybody would be happy, or at least a couple of people would be really happy if the town just wrote a check and we had the whole parcel. But given that that's not the discussion we're having right now, I think that we do have to have something that our community really, really wants to see on the park, and that have not seen that still. And a coffee shop isn't it. It's that 24/7 beer garden. I'm still waiting for it. So I hope we're open for that. So
7 o'clock in the morning beer?
It's
breakfast, breakfast beer, they call that. I'm just kidding about it. It was in the paper. Okay, next. Anybody who's ready?
Anyone?
Gary, go. You got ready, didn't you?
Well, I haven't. I mean, I have to admit, I do have pretty much, they're very similar concerns and issues I want to iron out that Jackie just brought up. The reality for us right now with the Tabor discussion and, really looking at what's on the table for the town. This community building has to be, for me, kind of shelved to another time, unless because it doesn't seem like there's any developer participation in that whatsoever, and I might be wrong, and you can change that in the future and we can correct that, but with no developer participation and the town's just going to buy the property, the town could decide at a later time what to do with it and honestly include it within the park planning and see where we go with that. With removing the community building, for me, I do believe that this development needs some type of kind of restaurant or restaurant space or ability for a restaurant space. I do believe that, trying to use that community building as that space, seemed to be working until I got the financials of it. And I was like, if the town's totally funding that, I need it to be pushed back onto the developer now, especially with the Tabor thing. So that's one thing I will be looking for in the conversation to continue with. I did not realize in the earlier discussions that the town was going to buy the art-based land and then sell it back. So that might just be confusion on my end, but I don't believe that the town should hold that for the art base. That should be the developer holding that for the art base and eventually getting paid back on that, because the developer, you guys are supposed to be creating something that can be used before the art base finishes, because the art base can't go right away. That has to be something that the public can use and is attractive and really works with the overall other developments. And, you know, I think we need to have I need to have a better understanding of how we're gonna work together on the road improvements and how we're gonna make that happen. I think we need a discussion on the RITA, you know, what's that gonna bring in, you know, and potentially there could be some negotiation there with payback and stuff, but those are gonna be needed to be done as the development starts. And so we gotta figure out a way to make that happen, because the road improvements are, you know, critical to the success of this project. What else did I have that was totally different? Anything truly different? You know, for me, I really appreciate Christy and her team and whoever else helped her to get all the costs together, because, you know, we talk about these sunk costs, and I consider them sunk costs, and it's you know, this conversation I wish went differently, but it didn't. I've been here a while, but I didn't have, you know, 1 of 7. You don't have full say on what happened to the money from the bond and everything else. But to me, I'm not necessarily looking to recoup all of that sunk cost. I just want to make this project work for the public. So there's got to be the public benefit to make this, you know, something that I would support. And I think we're closer. I feel like we're right-sized. How we do this with the free market residential that you say that, and from Bruce, that needs to be incorporated some way, somehow into this. I do have a concern about the, you know, making sure that feels like it's part of the overall park, that these residences aren't just these exclusive areas, that if I'm in the park and I'm behind these residences, I feel completely comfortable being there and completely comfortable walking by them, and that, you know, we don't get into the situation where these residences cause a problem when we want to have a big event in the park. And trying to figure that out now so we can do that will be critical. But I am supportive of moving forward with the pro forma and getting the final details. But I think we need to work on this financing piece. And, you know, I'm not saying you got to give us $750,000, what Bruce says, but we've got to have the community benefits that, you know, we really feel like this is a really good project for the town, and that, you know, we're never going to get 100% of the people to support this, but I want as much support as possible, because this is a little different, and I know we're not going to please everyone, but I think we're on a path to make it happen. And honestly, the reality of the Tabor issue is that the town can't just magically come up with extra funding right now, and we don't even know, even in the future, that we're going to be able to come up with the extra funding to be able to do massive infrastructure projects out of the general fund. Now, the different pots, and I don't know how you characterized it, the flavors or
the colors of money, to use Ryan's term of art.
Okay, so, but I want to be careful with those other funds too.
Absolutely.
Post is not 100% for this property, and so I do not want it to be overtaxed just for this property. And so we do need to be careful with those funds. I know we've been talking about a RITA, using some RITA, and that will help in the future if we want to do something outside of a park, open space or trail for this, but I just want to be careful with that. So as we move forward, I just don't want to I don't want that fund to be looked upon as a savior, because I think it's definitely been used here, and it'll be a significant investment of post funds in this, but we have other areas of the town that deserve as much attention as this area.
Thanks, Carrie.
Oops.
So, rare moment, I'm going to take my council hat off, and I'm going to speak as a citizen. I ran to be on this council 3 years ago, and the Basalt River Park parcel was a main instigator. And I felt that same spark that Royal, that Mark, that everyone who has spoken here tonight, and Gary, and Bernie, that,
And Jerry.
and Jerry, excuse me, I'm looking at Jerry. That there has been so much money sunk into this, an incredible amount of taxpayer funds. I adore and I love what we do have currently. I walk out there almost every single day and invest time by the river. The asset of the river in this town is phenomenal. I'm so grateful for that. The price to get there and the process, I will not deny, is angering and consternating. So, having been elected and sitting in this chair and shielding my eyes from the lights, I have learned so much in the last 3 years. And what I really want to put out there is not the selling out of make it all park, and to highlight reality. And the reality comes down to there has not been historically good record keeping or deal making, and we are now proverbially paying the price for that. And this is what we're facing, and this is what we are negotiating, and what we're dealing and working with. Within that, having seen that the town has sunk close to $6 million into the property, looking at the purchase price, I recognize that there is a premium to be paid for the corner lot, that is a preferable piece of land. But also, we've really earned it. We've invested a lot of money in there. And looking at this deal, seeing that the price tag for the land is only increasing, that's from an intelligent and well-versed background. That's difficult. I understand that you all want to make your numbers work, but please understand that we've invested a lot, and we are very close, and we want this to work. But that's a difficult point for me. What is a priority is, as well for me, owning as much of that land as possible and keeping the scale reasonable. We are pretty close to that sweet spot. In relation to the our town planning, or and the studies that were done in the past, citizens, it's true, I'm not going to deny it. They stated that residential is not the primary choice on there. It was one of the lowest. So I'm not looking to redesign this, but I am going to highlight that there has been a lot of feedback tonight and concern about the river cabins. And if there is a way to make the numbers work for everyone and have a little bit more density on there and have more row houses and less of these single-family enclave, that as far as the drawings go, I know that we're going to get into land use, but they do butt right up to the public parcel. If there's a way to still maintain and carry through the history of this parcel, and that it was higher density, there was multifamily, or trailers, but carrying that into the future a little bit more. Regarding the parkland dedication, I recognize this goes back to my earlier statement that our agreements were not written out, etc. I'd like to hear on our town pro forma an opinion from our attorney, Jeff, of what, if you have any say on that one, if there's any type of opinion that you can create there. Looking at the future as well, it would be very beneficial to have more of a spreadsheet that has the costs laid out. I recognize that this is a very complex mathematical word question equation, you know, on the exams where, but if we could make it a little simpler and clearer of the direct, indirect, and then as well, Christy's a whiz at this of what account it's going to come from, what the possibilities are. Just make it clearer and simpler, but still have all the details there. Looking at, into the future with the town pro forma, I'm game for tax capture ideas, Rita, and then as well, I'm curious to see if there's any ideas on timelines. I think that this is something that could benefit the public of, maybe we could have this approved and wrapped up by September of 2019, or is this going to be another long drawn out 2 more years? And just to have, which I'm not suggesting or wanting, but I think in order for us to continue through this process and keep loving each other and moving forward and seeing that there can be resolution, the light at the end of the tunnel is such an important, so if we can have a timeline.
Well put.
And public benefit, it's really depressing to say this, but I feel that the open space is what the public benefit is. I've been so worn down here. Sure, I want a 24/7 beer garden. I want a roller skating rink. I want, but really what it comes down to, the pearl, is what has been presented to us feels like all in one square rectangle, and it's all contained in there. And then everything outside of it is, okay, town, you're responsible. And I'd like to see more collaboration and feel of from the 6 million that we've put into this, that the community is going to see what the benefits are.
Thanks, Jen. Bill?
I have to share Royal's observation, again, as a resident and taxpayer too. When the town invested what is somewhere north of $7 million, again, the taxpayers have a right to expect certain things, and we secured taxpayer approval for the bonds, and my understanding is that the original thesis was to create an NGO campus and to have a hotel that could support big thinking seminars and conferences. And clearly that's not going to happen. We are far down the pike on that. But I do agree that it's completely reasonable, Royal, Mark, and others, to hold your council accountable for the money that they have spent in your name and which we continue to finance through the debt. I believe that in respect of what the town wanted and what the town told us they would like through the Our Town process, the vast majority, or the largest single cohort, expressed interest in having a restaurant. And so if we don't have a gathering space, I will broaden it up. If we don't have a place for the community to gather, to share a drink, time together, then I think this is further betrayal of the public expression of will. And so we've talked about the plausibility of the town financing the built element that would accommodate the restaurants and perhaps other functions. But again, I am not a fan at all of investing taxpayer money in what should be a private sector initiative. We are not good at all at running what are private enterprises. We should not be in the business of building, subletting to restaurants, operating, or in any way bearing this risk on behalf of taxpayers. So notwithstanding a different financial reality that now makes that investment ever less plausible, I would have encouraged you to consider ways to attract a restaurant, a well-equipped enterprise to manage and run that space. Having said that, I like many of the elements. I think the notion of bringing people into town for the purpose of participating in art-based related events is exactly what we said we wanted to do in our recently approved strategic framework. So this puts the town behind or in front, in partnership with you in executing on what we said was important. The makerspace, furthermore, will also, I think, facilitate a dynamism that we have also heard town wants, townspeople want. So in terms of some of the elements, I'm very supportive and not hostile to the further prospect of putting our money behind our objectives. And so we do support the arts. Arts and culture are fundamental to our economic objective. And if it ever came to be that we would finance some portion or all of the land on which the art base resides, that would be consistent with what we said we want to do, and we do finance the arts. However, it gets back to this big assumption that we're making that the art space has the money and is going to be able to execute in a timely fashion. And so that, you can't answer that, I can't answer that, but it is a question that we do need to answer because we don't want to have a gap in the plan, because the plan is to provide a place for the community to gather, for the community to appreciate arts and culture, and if we don't deliver on those, then it's a very different plan. But otherwise, again, our wonderful staff will talk to you about the purchase price. People have commented on that, so I won't. On the other costs that you're looking for the town to bear, again, staff, I think, is well equipped to discuss with you how we can rebalance based upon the solid analysis that Bruce and Ellers have done. But I want to thank you for your perseverance.
Thank you, Counselor.
You're very welcome.
Well,
Last man standing.
I know. What else is there to say? I feel like all my fellow councilors have expressed such thoughtful and valid points, especially related to being with Jen, going through a campaign 3 years ago in which there was such heightened opinions and passions related to what should happen with this park. And 3 years later, being where we're at, such an evolution and being in this seat, learning so much, I think that we're making progress, and I want to continue to move forward with the concerns that have been described tonight, such as, for me at least, it was surprising that the request for $2 million for 54% of the parcel, that took me aback. And then as Gary was discussing, related to the art base, I don't think you were off at all with what you didn't know, because I also didn't know that. I was completely surprised that the developer would request that the town take on $160,000 cost. I feel like that's a negotiation that should happen between either the CDC and the art base or the developer and the art base. I mean, there's a lot of great and interesting things that could happen that are beneficial to the CDC in terms of like generating interesting covenants and uses that are recorded with that parcel. I know you don't want to break it up, but creative covenants to make sure that that becomes what you hope it to become and what we hope it to become. One thing that kind of pops out to me, and I think Bill was kind of hitting on it, is that if the town takes on the community building, the art base is still completely up in the air. What we're left with is a development project that's lacking the vitality that we were hoping for. So I think as we move through this project, we're going to have to contemplate how we phase this and that it doesn't become an exclusive enclave, as many people were describing from public comment, and that we all seem to share that concern. So those are kind of my comments in a nutshell.
Thanks, Katie. Okay. Any additional staff comments from anything that you heard, or any questions of us to give you further guidance so that you can mull this?
I have two
Jeff.
quick things. I mean, I think we all took note of everyone. I think we all took note of all the counselors' comments, and I think I heard a general direction to continue to proceed down the path with Bruce, and talking to Tim. I didn't know in terms of, for this meeting, if you wanted Tim to respond to any of those comments or your comments, or if Tim, if you wanted to at all, or that was up to you, but I just wanted to.
You know what, I would prefer that there be a negotiation with staff and the applicant. I think when we come back, we'll get to hear more from the applicant. But for right now, I don't know, what do you think, Ryan?
The only thing I would say is if there was some clarity from any of your comments or public comments that just might add to the conversation, not necessarily, point to point, or tit for tat for negotiating or anything, but just in case, if Tim had something, I don't know that would
Clarifying
be,
anything's over there?
Well, I think there's some, thank you. Only a couple things, I promise. The art base is getting a lot of attention, and in terms of the sequence of how that would roll out and become the art base's new home, the $160,000 is not a big deal here, guys. It's more that while it's not their home, or if it never became their home, it seemed to me that philosophically you just wouldn't want to turn that property over to the private development sector without a plan even established for that. You would want to control that within the town's ownership. So that was really what was driving more than anything. It's not the 160K. It seems the town should have total control of that parcel in case it doesn't come to fruition.
Anything else?
Thank you for the
I think it may
clarification.
make sense for us to think about a restaurant study for downtown Basalt, because we all are enamored with the 24/7 beer garden. We always have been. There's not a point of dispute there. The discussion is about whether that's viable. I like beer. And
Yes.
we all do.
Rich is in for the beer garden.
So there's not a discussion about, that's a bad
We'd like a
thing.
vote amongst the team over there.
But the concern is, the concern that I have had and that I think everybody kind of gets to after they really study that is there really room for, even with the additional density of residential and office uses over there, and the art base expanding in size, is there enough density to support a new restaurant in downtown Basalt without putting another one out? And that may be studyable later.
Okay.
That's all.
Anything else? Everybody's really tired, I can tell. I know, speaking for this side of the table, everybody's really tired. If not, it seems like staff is suggesting that we continue this, and is to the 23rd long enough? Is that good?
I guess I have, just in some of the comments that I heard tonight, questioning some of the current mix of uses on the property. And so if we were going to go back and revisit the mix of uses, such as changing all of the river cabins into stacked condos or something, adding a restaurant, I think that kind of changes
everything.
And
Okay,
takes
so-
us kind of back to
well-
square one. And so I feel like I need a little better clarity as to, are we going to, on the developer side of the ledger, negotiate points based on the existing plan? Maybe there's some little minor tweaks, or are we going to do so on redefined
Well,
plan.
you know, I think that part of the difficulty here is it's been, what, December that we last talked about this? And so the land use side of it, my memory was, we're gonna enter into this pro forma piece of the process based on that thing that was in front of us. Not that anybody's locked into that thing that's in front of us. And I think I definitely hear some questioning about, is that the thing? So clearly, this all has to be able to flux a little bit if it changes. But, I mean, I heard pretty much to a person that there is a concern about at least the river cabins. At least the river cabins. I'm not sure I heard anything else, maybe more density and
It was, I
affordable
think, to
housing.
summarize where we came from, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was, balance the river cabins with a commercial kitchen. That's in summary what it seemed like we all unilaterally. No?
Well, and what I'm hearing kind of unilaterally from up here and out there is that the river cabins may create a sense of not fun. I mean, this is one of the things that we have talked about since the very first day, which is if you have residential at all, let alone high-end residential, how is that gonna work with heavy use in that park, which I hope there is heavy use in that park, wherever it might be. And so I think that is something that everyone is questioning now. So we're just putting it out there. So maybe through conversations with the applicant and their team, you can work through that a little bit. Yeah, Katie.
Well, just reflecting back in December, because this has always been a struggle for me, because I don't want high-end housing there. But we kind of, and Jen was saying it's a commercial kitchen, but for me, it was that we were coming up with all this inventive, inexpensive, flexible housing, and there was that buffer between the vigorous use of the park and the restaurant and the community area. And then we were moving into art-based that calmed it down, and then we moved into another phase that calmed it down, and then we moved into residential but accessible, affordable. And then like I guess we have to give this to you, developer, to make the rest of it happen. We're gonna give you river cabins, and we're gonna push it way over on the other side so that it's quieter over there. I feel like that's kind of like the evolution of how we got to this development agreement.
Right.
So to now come back to like, now we don't want that. We're not gonna get anywhere by reversing or adding 6 months to this process. And for me, it was a huge thing to get over. But I guess sitting here 3 years later, I've come to realize that that's the reality when working with a for-profit developer.
So
They
maybe,
have to make money.
maybe at the next meeting, we kind of circle back on the land use side of it and see where we really are.
Well,
And assuming that this is what we're looking at. Yeah, Bill.
I heard Katie saying something different, and I have to agree with you. I feel like we've already gone through this process of discussing what is gonna work and what is not gonna work. We can't keep reopening decisions that were made by council at prior meetings, because otherwise, we can go back to the very start. Why don't we have an NGO campus there? We made decisions over the past 6 months, certainly since you first presented. We gave them marching orders, and now we've taken a significant step forward, and the marching order that should emerge from tonight that you have requested is to further negotiate on the points that were raised in the Ehlers memo. I did not understand that everything was on the table to be rediscussed tonight, and I would not suggest that that would be a good course of action.
Well, you were one of the people who expressed concern about the river cabins as well.
No, I didn't.
Tonight.
I did not. I said nothing about the residential.
Okay. I thought you said something about
No,
Royals.
my
comments.
concern is strictly related to the private ownership of the public space, or of a public space.
Okay, well.
That is my principal concern.
Yes.
and it was, to me, it's trying to figure out the public investment. That was the piece where we've invested a ton into this property, so how do we move forward? I'm not necessarily asking for a complete renegotiation of the land use piece. I want, when my concerns were on the river cabins, was to make sure that it incorporates into the park, that it's not an exclusive. Like Katie came up with a very, we have to provide vitality, and I don't want this to stop the vitality. So I'm not trying to renegotiate what we have already done. I just want to refine it and negotiate it and with the costs and get to a point where we can see if we can go, we're making a deal or not.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Are you good?
Yeah, that's much more clear. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I just wanted to say one thing, just in response to what Bill said. No, the council has not taken any formal action yet. It's provided clear direction to us, but I understand that's what you were saying, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that the council has not taken any formal action on the application yet. And that's all.
Okey-doke. Thanks. So do we still want the motion to continue to April 23rd?
What do you want?
Or the May
14th.
May 14th.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we continue to May 14th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Yes.
Thank you.
We're good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I just want to throw an extra thank you to the hard work. I mean, staff always works hard on these issues. It seems like these money issues, financial issues, are very draining and take every bit of what everybody has. So thank you again for that.
It energizes this one.
She's sick.
I know.
She's sick.
Yeah, this is great.
Not me. Doesn't energize me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
7:30. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. I think I better take this one home. So our next item is first reading of ordinance number 7, an ordinance of the town establishing the Basalt Financial Advisory Board as a formal advisory board to the town council. Ryan and Christie?
So, so I'll take just the quick stab at the introduction. So I heard from several of you on the draft that we put in the packet had some typos in it that included, including post. And we, unfortunately, sort of towards the last minute, we're merging 2 documents and missed several of those. So those minor edits certainly easily cleaned up and will be reviewed. So I did meet with Bill today, and I've also met, or at least passed this along, well, I've met with the 2 existing citizen committee members to talk to them about these bylaws, and have sent them this draft, and I believe Doug is still here in case he has some comments. There was a request. I don't know that I want to necessarily walk through all of your comments, but I'll hit some of the more substantive highlights. There was a request in there to just add a role and responsibility that included basically undertaking research or analysis related to fiscal or financial affairs of the town that may be directed by the town council. So in other words, town council has an issue they want looked at further, and they direct the committee to take a look, sort of a deep dive, and come back to them with more information is how I understood it. And I think, in my opinion, that would go with the intent of what we're trying to get at with this committee. And I'll go through these, and if you have any editorials, Bill, you can let me know. On the member guidelines, this is also on the first page under A. We had gone through and just softened a little bit of language in there where it talks about financial advisory board members should avoid presenting themselves as representatives of the town, and they should avoid acting independently to make decisions. We had added that should in there to kind of soften it, but Bill felt that was something that's in more of an absolute, like you really can't do that if you're on a committee. That's not your charge. And so just coming up with perhaps a different word in there that's not should.
Can't you just shall it?
You can
shall it instead of should it?
Yeah, shall it.
Yeah.
And then that achieves.
Shall not present themselves?
Yes.
That works.
And that's an absolute.
Or
and,
shall not act independently?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, these are actually questions for Jeff.
Yeah, no, it should be.
I mean, they are not mandated to represent the
So
town.
this should probably be with all the,
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can hit those throughout. And then one of the things on the third page, just as far as, or I'm sorry, the second page, number 3 under communication strategy, was an addition of some language that included that all committees should present an annual work plan to the town council. And Bill and I had a little bit of a debate on the timing of that. He was sort of looking at it at the end of the year, so that, as we get into the next year, that we start on there. And of course, if there is a budget implication that this committee might be looking at, if we do it at the end of the year, we've just adopted the budget. But I think point well taken that you all, and I think that's come out during our discussions, the idea is to get a nod from the council on what the committee is going to put their efforts into for the year. And whether that's at the end of the year or the middle of the year, I don't think Bill necessarily cares. It's just making sure we add some clarity around that expectation.
And this, Jackie, would also be relevant to all committees.
Yeah.
And work plan doesn't mean 300 pages. Work plan could be 3 bullet points.
Sure.
These are our top priorities for the coming year, and this one may or may not need money.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
The next thing had to do on page 3, which was the membership. And in here we had talked about having extensive experience in finance and accounting, that came through your participation professionally in your professional capacity working in finances or what have you. And Bill thought that just restricting it to a strict finance background was too limiting. That if there was an attorney out there that had experience, or somebody that was an economist or something, that they could also qualify. But I think the general gist for us was from staff as we produced this was really making sure that the folks that we had on there would have the capacity or the understanding to turn around some of these kind of heady, tough topics as it relates to our town finances. And so I think I'd be looking for a little feedback on that. We could certainly come up with some language. Recall that this is like a first reading, so we could bring back language to you at the next meeting.
what about this? What about just doing that? Bring back just
Well, because it sounds like
Because
Ryan's asking
he
us
wants our
what he
feedback.
wants us
Like-
to bring back.
wordsmith it now.
No, I don't want to wordsmith it now. Just
Okay.
like these kind of changes that Bill and I discussed are they seem logical for us
Yeah.
or not, or
That's the feedback he wants from us.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I'm getting close to the end here.
That was basically the gist of it.
Yeah, that was
That's just of it?
Yep.
Okay, so, do you want us to,
If
so
you
what
agree
is,
with those changes, then we could bring something back to
so it is
you.
first reading,
It's
so
first
just
reading.
bring it back, edited
For second reading.
for second reading.
For second reading, yeah, that's great. And I don't know if Doug had any.
Did you have anything, Doug?
Actually, I was gonna change the should.
Oh, okay.
Decided not to. That's fine, I agree with that.
Oh, so
He was
Doug,
gonna
maybe you can weigh in outside this meeting as well.
We'll get with him offline then, yeah.
All right. Okay, then is there a motion on this?
It's a
Is it a
motion to
motion?
approve ordinance number 7 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for April 23rd, 2019.
Okay, I motion that, and for Ryan to integrate all these discussed changes and edits.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
I have, and one comment is honestly who the advisory board is made up of. I do feel that they should have a financial background. And so I think having it as a general financial background, attorneys deal with like so many people deal with finances.
And we would
Bank
keep
tellers.
that.
Yeah.
We would
so-
keep the finance piece, to your point, but maybe expand. I think we were sort
A
of
lot of
laser
faces,
focused
Susan.
on, like, you're a CPA or you're, you know, you were, you know, a CFO of a corporation, and there are other people with those skill sets that we could just kind of broaden that a little bit. But yes, I agree. You need to have some financial wherewithal.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okey dokey. How about first reading of ordinance 8, an ordinance of the town establishing the Basalt Parks, Open Space, and Trails Committee as a formal advisory board? Ryan, Susan.
Susan's taking the floor on this one.
Okay, well, you know, this just follows the kind of the format that we used for the Basalt Financial Advisory Board, and we use that as a template. And we had actually done a lot of work. We had actually prepared a draft ordinance in 2014 to formalize post, and then when we kind of took off with the whole river master plan effort, we kind of set that aside. So we were able to take kind of the mission and the roles and responsibilities from that. And then we took it to the post committee. They talked about it at the last meeting. They had some suggestions that we talked over with Ryan, and we incorporated some of those in the Basalt Financial Advisory Committee 1, kind of working back and forth. They made some good suggestions on the criteria for appointment and, you know, wanting to make sure that the person had a desire to work with other community members to incorporate the goals of the board. So I think we'll do the same thing. There's some of those recommendations that Bill and Ryan talked about, obviously we'll incorporate into this one. And so I think we're looking for a motion to approve on first reading.
I got one question.
Yep.
And it's on number 9 in your roles and responsibility.
Yep.
And it's develop and maintain a system to evaluate proposed land purchases.
We actually have one now.
You
and
do?
we've used it on all of the purchases. And I actually tweaked the language from the ordinance because, but we used it on Grange. We actually used it on the Pan and Fork.
Okay.
It ranked like 27 out of 28 necessary points. So we've used it in the past, and we haven't done any land purchases, and that's why we have it's not been on your radar. And probably before we would purchase more parks, or I think we'd probably want to maybe revisit it. It's heavy on like conservation values and stuff like that. So.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Gary?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one of the other changes is maybe different from the way they operate now is, to date, we've always just kept, you had to live in town, and they added some language that you could have 1 or 2 members that lived out of town.
And that's my next question.
Yeah.
I like the finance piece of a business owner. I'm a little concerned about living out of town. I see it in other committees. I want to limit on out of town somehow, some way.
So that's why what came out of the post committee was, you know, limiting the number, obviously.
Well, I know that.
And then also that you have a strong tie to the Basalt community, and that you work, or that you work in the town limits. So,
Why is it that we feel like we don't have enough people in town to serve on these committees? Or what is behind this?
What's the impetus?
well, you know, I'd say just overall, globally, I think our committees have been strengthened by the fact that we have out-of-town people. There's a lot of people that, you know, like Royal, who really care about the town. And if you look at BPAC, there's actually, we get more applicants from people that work in town, work in the school district, you know,
Can we
work in those,
clarify
yeah.
that?
What?
I just want to, I don't mind, the strong connection scares me because it's, I would like to have somebody who works or is a business owner in town, you know, because that to me is the connection.
Yep.
It's not somebody who drives through Basalt every day or he uses, you know, our park. I would just, I have a concern that we're leaving it open for somebody to come in who, you know, potentially lives elsewhere, and I'd like to strengthen it if everyone.
We can work on some.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody not okay with that?
No.
Okay. Where are we on this?
But I think
I
we
have
need a
the-
motion.
I have
Well,
some
this is-
questions.
Okay, all right.
Can you tell me about role number 6, help make the case for new resources when necessary to fulfill the goals of the town?
Well, this would be like if they wanted to do a GoCo grant or, look at using other pots of money, you know, of, for example, it kind of came out of the discussions a few years ago that we should have more money towards maintenance. So those kind of, you know, ideas about resources, I think is kind of globally what we were talking about.
I see it as help, you know, when we ask Picken County or Eagle County for funding,
Yeah.
you want the post members to join you and make the case for it, because it's stronger when you have the community posing the question to the other elected boards or GoCo
Right, as a committee.
as a committee. So
I
that's
think
what
this
I'd say.
sentence is not totally clear.
I know, that,
Yeah.
Could you make
that's
that
what I
a little
just-
more clear? I just,
because you could take it many different ways. I would just clarify that a little bit better.
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay.
And then a second point, I propose that we, across the board, have the same terms for all the committees. So why is the finance committee 2 years and post 3 years? I propose that all of the committees are 2 years, and as in all the committees, there is the option to renew, but to make a term 2 year.
Why not?
Well, it's just a lot of appointments. It's a lot of keeping track of appointments. Normally, they were running with, well, I think it started with P and Z. P and Z and the code has 3 years, and so then you have overlapping terms so that you always have someone that's been on the committee and you're bringing new people in. You guys can do it that way, but you're gonna be doing a lot of reappointments and appointments.
Takes a lot of work.
Well, then why don't we all make them all 3 years?
Why did finance be 2?
Well, we need to have consistency.
That's what
I like the
Right.
consistency piece, I agree,
Exactly.
I agree. I would be fine if we went on the finance committee piece, we could obviously, you know, bring that back, even though we're not talking about that particular item right now, but I get the alignment and,
Okay.
I would advocate for the 3 years probably versus the 2, just for, that,
It's a lot of appointments.
yeah.
Everybody
appointment,
okay
the
with
extra
that?
work and.
I feel that the 2 years just aligns with council as being 4 years, and so, I haven't found that the appointment subcommittee, it sucks up a ton of time. It's pretty painless. You schedule them all in the,
Well, but if,
or from a staff standpoint, I understand that it takes more time. But just looking to ensure that the citizens that are on our advisory committees are reflective and I just like to see the consistency one way or another. And I just like that the 2 years is half of 4 years. It just,
I mean, they make a pretty
division.
strong case on the, like, revolving door of all these committees. It doesn't matter to me, 2 or 3 is fine with me.
I just don't like people being able to go, oh, I got 2 years and I'm off. You know, trying to get people to commit for longer periods of time. We need that, and that's the hardest part in this community, is getting people to commit.
Gary, it's not like marriage. You don't want people to feel like they have to stay because they can't get
Well,
out.
3 years. You committed to what, 8, 12?
Regardless, I mean, I think like,
people who are gonna show up are gonna show up, and if they're
Yeah,
not gonna
they
show
are.
up, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 or 3 years.
Are we okay with
I
3?
don't care.
Because staff feels somewhat strongly, it appears.
Well, you guys have to advertise every 2 years for positions, but if you're staggering them in all of them, is it the end of the world for 2?
You know, why don't we bring back a recommendation? We can
Okay.
kick it.
Okey dokey.
Yeah.
All right.
That's fine.
So now where are we?
Make a motion,
Ready to,
unless you have other.
Those were my questions and comments. And I fully agree with Gary's point of keeping Post in town. That is the one advisory committee that does have substantial funding, input, and just important there. So, Mayor, I move that the town council approve or come back with ordinance number 8, series of 2019, or approve it on first reading, and approve it with our comments on first reading, and set the public hearing and second reading for April 23rd, 2019.
Is there a second?
second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, just while we're in between these, because they're taking a lot longer than I thought, maybe it just goes without saying that maybe somebody could sit down and spread these out and make sure they're all like edited and consistent and
Yes, we will.
all those things that you want. I know you've got bigger fish to fry. How about Resolution 17, resolution of the town approving an agreement for professional services with SGM Inc. for technical assistance contractor services related to the Lake Christine Fire NRCS grant. Ryan, Chrissy.
You wanna
Sure.
hit it up, Chrissy?
Sure. So this one's gonna hopefully go quick, Madam
It is a fat one.
This is kind of in sync with everything we've talked about on the NRCS agreement already. Looking at what you guys have already discussed around the state grant, this is just the culmination of all of that into now a formalized agreement with SGM to make sure it meets the obligations of the NRCS grant. And talking with SGM, they're very amicable to this agreement. Everything is fine, and so is the state and the federal government. So we've followed all the compliance rules with it, and we believe that this protects the town effectively, because a lot of the concern runs around this 10% maximum of technical assistance costs. And so this helps to mitigate that by just, hey, we gotta watch this, we gotta look at this monthly, that kind of thing, and have some good reporting around it, so.
This is a single reading sort of subject. Is there any questions or comments on this, Guy?
I think it's fantastic and amazing, and I'm so grateful for
Is
the
that a motion?
partnership. Yes, so I move that the town council approve resolution number 17, series of 19 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Awesome, thank you, Christy. Resolution 18, resolution of the town approving an intergovernmental agreement with Colorado Parks and Wildlife related to the Lake Christine Fire NRCS grant. Related to that first thing that we just did? Or, okay, is there anything about this one that's different than the other one?
A little bit.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're still in negotiations with CPW because of the turnover with Perry Wills and Matt, that they're really short on time. They're trying to catch up as fast as they can. So we, with Jeff's help and assistance, put some language in the resolution that allowed us to still make minor tweaks to the agreement, while still moving the project forward, because we realized that the time is of the essence with this flood mitigation. So we believe that this really kind of plays both of those pieces well, and also it's very similar to the IGA with Eagle County. So a little bit different language just because of the state requirements around CPW are different. They're not going to allow for that 12.5% reimbursement like the IGA for Eagle does. So we had to write that into the agreement a little differently.
And I might just add one thing. I did get an update from Matt Yamashita on Monday, and he had indicated to me that sort of at their local level, they've gone through it, they've approved it, it has to go through the layers of state government. So ultimately, what he alluded to is sort of the CFO of the state. That's not the title, but that person's going to need to ultimately sign off on this, and it could be 60 days before we get that back from them. And so it is what it is.
Mayor nagging or
well,
anything?
in fact, I did tell him, I said, you know, if there are unreasonable delays, Matt, we may need to push this along and sort of use any sort of political clout. We might have to reach out to the state people that might be able to get this going, because this is an emergency response type of thing. This isn't a normal where we have lots of time. We have 220 days from a few weeks back now to get this complete.
Well, let me know if you want me to.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, is there a motion? Or not?
I don't have it in front of me, but somebody does.
It's Mayor, I move that the town council approve resolution 18 of 2019 as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I know it's getting harder and harder. Okay, first reading of ordinance number 9, an ordinance of the town amending Chapter 4, Article 4, Sales Tax, and Chapter 6, Article 1, Business Licenses and Regulations of the Muni Code to provide for an exemption for sales tax and business license requirements for entities without a physical presence in the town. Christy Jeff.
Yes, what a great way to finish the night. This is gonna be an awesome conversation. Are you guys stoked? See?
She is so stoked about money and numbers. Okay.
This is exciting. Well, numbers help people when you do it the right way. So do ordinances, so does town code, and that's a real great thing about this particular.
What is the gist of this thing?
Topic is that really the gist of this thing is with the new sales tax regulations from the state that are requiring all of these small businesses an additional burden of having to go through all these towns and get all these different licenses and that kind of thing. What we're doing is we're trying to simplify our code so that they don't have to do that. So really all they're required to do as far as we're concerned is to get a sales and business or sales license through the state. And since we are state collected, then it allows them to just do that, which they do anyway.
Perfect.
So it's gonna help our businesses. That's why I'm excited.
You are excited.
I have to add my thanks and praise as a small business owner, because when we sell to Aspen, as a for instance, I am supposed to remit Aspen sales tax to Aspen and to RAFTA and to the county.
Oh, God.
And I'm not aware that Aspen requires a business license. I checked, they said no, and that's good, but other communities may require it. You can't imagine how mind-bogglingly complex and onerous this would be for a tiny little firm like ours.
But for Christie and the state.
And so,
Yeah.
retailers like we.
Honey, is that a motion?
Yes, I will. I would love to motion this one. This is really important and very good. So, thank you. Mayor, I move that the town council approve ordinance number 9, series of 2019, on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for April 23rd, 2019.
A quick second.
I have a question.
Okay, well, can you second it?
Second and question.
Okay.
So this also, I don't order anything from Amazon, but this would now require Amazon to pay sales tax to the town of Basalt.
They do already.
It's state law, they already do.
Yeah.
And so then the question would be, does Amazon now have to get a sales tax license and a business license at a significant, time suck for, Connie and for Pam and for the town? So the answer now is no. Before in our ordinance, it was kind of probably yes. And so now we're just getting up with the times.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Oh my God, that passed. We are, unless somebody else has any burning issue that's not really on this agenda, we are adjourned. Thank you. Bye.